The rain hammered the tin roof of our trailer in rural Ohio like God's own judgment. But it was my stepmother's voice that shattered me first. "Get out, you filthy little queer. Don't you ever come back," she screamed. Her face twisted in that holy roller fury I'd seen building for months, ever since she caught me stealing glances at the boys' swim team photos in the local paper. My dad just stood there in the kitchen doorway, his calloused hands limp at his sides, eyes on the floor like he was ashamed of the mud on his boots more than the sun he was letting go. I was 16, with nothing but a backpack stuffed with a change of clothes, my beat-up acoustic guitar, and a wad of crumpled 20s from mowing lawns all summer. The screen door slammed behind me as I stumbled into the storm, the cold sheets of water slapping my face like accusations. Freedom tasted like rust and regret that night, as I hitchhiked toward the flickering lights of Cleveland, wondering if the city would swallow me whole or spit me back out broken. That was the hook that snagged my life, yanked me from the straight-laced Midwest into the wild pulse of America, where dreams either bloom or bleed out in the gutters. I landed in Cleveland's underbelly, crashing on the couches of strangers who called themselves allies, volunteering at a youth shelter that smelled like instant noodles and unwashed hope. That's where I first laid eyes on Troy. He was 20, with that effortless swagger of someone who'd fought his own wars and come out swinging, tousled dark hair, a faded tattoo of a phoenix on his forearm peeking from under his flannel, and green eyes that saw right through your bullshit. He ran poetry slams at the shelter, his voice wrapping around words like resilient and unbreakable, in a way that made you believe you could be both. We met over a shared guitar one rainy Tuesday night. I was strumming some half-baked chords in the corner, trying to drown out the ache of missing a home that had never really been mine. Troy slid onto the stool beside me, his knee brushing mine in that electric way that sends sparks up your spine. "That E minor's crying for a bridge, man," he said, his Ohio drawl softened by city edges. "Let me show you." His fingers danced over the frets, turning my mess into something raw and beautiful, a melody about lost boys finding their way. By the end of the song, our hands were tangled on the neck of the guitar, and I knew this was the kind of collision that rewrites your story. Troy became my anchor in that first brutal year. We scraped by on odd jobs, him bartending at a dive called the Rusty Anchor, me busking on Public Square with a sign that read "Tunes for Tips." No hate, just heart. Nights were ours, tangled in the sheets of his tiny apartment above a laundromat, whispering dreams under the hum of the dryers below. He told me about his own coming-out apocalypse. Disowned by his trucker dad in Akron, crashing through foster homes until he aged out at 18. "Love ain't a luxury, Shane," he'd say. Tracing the scar on my knuckle from that night, I punched a wall after the eviction. It's the only goddamn revolution worth fighting for. And God, did I love him. Fiercely, quietly, in the way that sneaks up on you like dawn over Lake Erie. We'd walk the shores at sunrise, his arms slung over my shoulders, talking about escaping to New York, where the streets didn't judge you for who you kissed under the marquee lights. But America doesn't hand out happy endings on silver platters, especially not to kids like us. The conflict started small, like cracks in a dam. Troy got a scholarship to NYU for creative writing. His poems about queer survival had gone viral in some underground lit mag, and suddenly the city that birthed our love was pulling us apart. "It's just 2 years, babe," he promised over greasy diner eggs the night he left. "I'll write you every day. We'll make it." I nodded, choking down the fear that distance turns devotion into dust. For a while, it worked. Letters flew like carrier pigeons. His detailing the chaos of Greenwich Village, mine chronicling my gigs at open mics where straight crowds clapped politely, but never quite got the ache in my lyrics. Then came the betrayal, sharp as a switchblade in the ribs. It was 6 months in, right around my 18th birthday. I'd saved enough to bus to the city for a surprise visit, crashing at a hostel and showing up at his dorm with a six-pack and that guitar we'd shared. But Troy wasn't alone. I heard the laughter first, deep, intimate, spilling from his cracked door. Peeking through, I saw him on the bed with some lithe artsy type, all sharp cheekbones and whispered nothings, their bodies close in a way that mirrored ours once upon a time. My heart didn't break. It imploded, sucking the air from my lungs. I didn't confront him, just turned and bolted into the Manhattan night, the skyscrapers blurring through hot tears. Back in Cleveland, I ghosted him, no calls, no letters. The shelter counselor called it self-preservation, but it felt like amputation. I poured the pain into my music, scribbling songs about phantom touches and promises that evaporate like morning fog. That's when the spark ignited. A scout from an indie label caught my set at a Pride festival, raw, unpolished tracks about being the kid the world tried to erase, and offered me a demo deal. "You've got that fire, kid," he said, clapping my shoulder. "The kind that sells tickets and breaks hearts." By 22, I was Shane Harlan, the voice of a generation's quiet rebellions. My debut album, Echoes from the Edge, climbed the indie charts, ballads about lost loves and reclaimed selves resonating in coffee shops from Seattle to Savannah. Tours blurred into a whirlwind. Sold-out rooms in Austin, where cowboys two-stepped to queer anthems. Nashville dives that echoed with my Ohio twang. Troy faded to a scar, one I poked at in lyrics but never let bleed on stage. I built walls of fame, interviews in Out magazine calling me the next great American storyteller. Red carpet nods at GLAAD Awards where I toasted to the boys who'd made it and the ones who hadn't. Fame's a fickle mistress, though. It amplifies everything. The highs of sold-out arenas, the lows of empty hotel rooms where the applause echoes hollow. I dated. A parade of pretty faces, from a playwright in Chicago to a surfer poet in LA, but none stuck. They saw the spotlight, not the shadows. Deep down, I was still that 16-year-old under the rain, chasing a belonging that felt just out of reach. Therapy helped unpack the abandonment, the way my stepmom's Bible-thumping had branded me unworthy. "Forgiveness isn't for them, Shane," my shrink said over Zoom from her Brooklyn brownstone. "It's for you, to stop carrying their hate like a backpack." The high tide crashed on a crisp October night in 2025, at the Schubert Theater on Broadway. My one-man show, Outcast Symphony, had transferred from off-Broadway after rave reviews. The New York Times dubbed it a gut punch of melody and memory. The lobby buzzed with A-listers and fans, the air thick with perfume and anticipation. I was backstage, pacing in a slim-fit tux that hid the nerves gnawing my gut, when the stage manager poked her head in. "Shane, there's someone here. Family, maybe? Asking for you." I froze. Family? The word tasted like ash. But curiosity dragged me out, weaving through the velvet ropes into the throng. And there she was. My stepmother, Evelyn Harlan, no, Harlan Stevens now, I guessed, from the unfamiliar lines etched on her face. She looked smaller than I remembered, swallowed by a threadbare coat that screamed hard times. Her once iron hair streaked silver and limp. She clutched a program like a lifeline, eyes scanning the posters until they locked on mine. That massive glossy of me, mid-strum, spotlit like a goddamn saint. For a split second, recognition flickered, then horror. Her mouth opened in a silent gasp, the program fluttering to the marble floor. "Shane?" she whispered, voice cracking like dry leaves. "My God, it's you." The lobby noise faded to a roar in my ears as she staggered forward, hand outstretched, then crumpled. Straight down, knees buckling, her body hitting the cold stone with a thud that silenced the crowd. Gasps rippled out. Someone yelled for a medic. I dropped to her side, the boy I'd been surging up through the man I'd become. Pulse pounding, hands hovering, afraid to touch. Paramedics swarmed, stabilizing her on a gurney as she came to, murmuring my name like a prayer gone wrong. "I didn't know. After you left, your father. He drank himself, gone 2 years later. Cancer took him quick." Her eyes, watery now, searched mine. Not with the fire of old, but a weary plea. "I was scared, Shane. The church, the neighbors. They said you'd burn in hell. I thought I was saving you, but I lost everything, including you." The betrayal I'd nursed for years cracked open then. Not in rage, but a flood of something softer. Pity, maybe, laced with the faint thread of understanding. America had taught me that we're all just flawed pilgrims on this messy highway, dodging potholes of prejudice and pride. I rode in the ambulance with her to Mount Sinai, holding her cool hand as monitors beeped a steady rhythm. "You don't have to forgive me," she said in the ER curtain, voice frail. "But no, I watched. Every song on the radio, every clip online. You made it, boy. You made something beautiful out of the ugly I gave you." I didn't forgive her that night, not fully. But as dawn broke over the East River, painting the skyline in golds and grays, I felt the weight lift. Troy had been right. Love was revolution. Not just the kind that burns bright and brief, but the slow burn of humanity reclaiming itself. I texted him later, after settling her in a quiet room with a promise to visit. Saw a ghost tonight. Turns out we're all haunted. Missed the music we made. His reply came quick. New York in spring? Bridges to build, not burn. Back at the Schubert that evening, the show went on. Standing ovation, encores that shook the rafters. But the real curtain call was in that hospital room, where a woman who'd cast me out reached for the son she'd mourned in silence. It's not a fairy tale. No tidy bows on the wounds. But in the heart of this sprawling, contradictory country, from Ohio trailers to Broadway lights, it's human. And that's the only fame worth chasing. The grace to turn betrayal into bridge, one shaky step at a time.